The sound of the waves was calm. Too calm. Police lights flashed blue and red across the sand at Gilgo Beach, cutting through the night like warning signs. Officers stood frozen as flashlights moved slowly over the ground. What they were looking at would change American true crime forever. Buried beneath the tall beach grass were human remains. Not one body, not two, but signs that someone had been killing again and again and hiding it in plain sight. For years, this stretch of Long Island shoreline looked peaceful. Families drove past it every day. Joggers ran along the road. The ocean kept its steady rhythm. But beneath the sand, secrets waited, dark ones. And now, after more than a decade of silence, police were about to name a suspect, an architect, a husband, a man with a normal life in Manhattan. No one on that beach could imagine that the person they were hunting designed buildings by day and, prosecutors say, lived a double life by night. As officers secured the scene, one question hung heavy in the air. How did this happen for so long without anyone stopping it? And even more chilling, was this really the end or just the beginning of what they were about to uncover? That question would not be answered tonight. Years earlier, long before the flashing lights and crime scene tape, the story began quietly. In the early 2000s, young women started disappearing in New York. Many of them were struggling. Some worked escort jobs. Others were just trying to survive. When they vanished, their families called police. Most of the time, nothing happened. Some reports were brushed aside. Some were delayed. Some were ignored completely. The women seemed to vanish into thin air. One of them was last heard from during a phone call that suddenly went silent. Another left home and never returned. Days passed, then weeks, then years. No bodies were found at first, no clear suspect, no pattern the public could see. Life moved on. Until one winter day in 2010, when a search for a missing woman led police to something far worse. A canine unit was brought to Gilgo Beach to help locate a missing person. The dog began digging near the tall grass just off Ocean Parkway. That's when they found the first set of remains. Then another, then another. 4 women were discovered in the same area, wrapped in burlap, placed only feet apart. Investigators quickly realized this was no accident. This was careful, planned. The media exploded with one terrifying phrase: serial killer. The case became known as the Gilgo Beach murders, also called the Long Island serial killer case. Fear spread fast. People wanted answers. Families wanted justice. But the answers didn't come. For years, the case stalled. Different police departments argued. Evidence sat untouched. Tips went nowhere. The killer stayed hidden. Some believed the person responsible was highly intelligent. Others thought he knew the area very well. Many suspected he had power, money, or both. Still, no arrest. Time passed. The beach remained open. Cars drove by every day, and the killer, whoever he was, walked free. Until technology caught up. Investigators began reviewing old evidence with new tools. Phone records were examined again. Burner phones, cheap phones meant to be thrown away, started to tell a story. Calls made years ago now pointed toward a single pattern. One man kept appearing in the data.
A man who lived far from Gilgo Beach, but not too far. A man who fit the profile no one wanted to believe. Rex Heuermann. He was a large, quiet architect who worked in Midtown Manhattan. He owned a small architecture firm. He had a wife, children. Neighbors described him as strange, but not dangerous. No criminal record, no history of violence. But investigators noticed something unsettling. The burner phones used to contact victims were traced to locations near his office and his home. Vehicle records placed him near key locations at key times. Internet searches linked to his devices raised serious red flags. For the first time in years, the case had direction. Still, police moved slowly. They watched, they followed, they waited. Then, in 2023, everything changed. Heuermann was arrested in dramatic fashion. Cameras captured him being led away in handcuffs. The nation watched as prosecutors laid out their case. They accused him of murdering multiple women whose remains were found near Gilgo Beach. The shock was instant. An architect, a man who designed spaces meant for people to live and work, now accused of designing death. But even after the arrest, the story didn't settle. It grew darker. Searches of his home revealed disturbing items. Investigators spoke carefully, choosing words that wouldn't inflame the public. But the message was clear. This case was bigger than anyone thought. Families who had waited over a decade felt hope and fear at the same time. Hope that justice might finally come. Fear that there could be more victims. And one haunting question echoed louder than ever. How many? As Heuermann sat in custody, more evidence was reviewed. More names were whispered. Old disappearances were reopened. The beach, once quiet, became a symbol of failure and neglect, a place where voices went unheard. And just when the public thought they understood the case, investigators hinted at something chilling. They were not done digging, not at the beach, not in the evidence, and not in the suspect's past. Because what they were beginning to uncover suggested that the man accused of these crimes may have been hiding secrets long before Gilgo Beach ever made headlines. Secrets that could change the entire story. And as the courtroom doors closed behind Rex Heuermann, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was not just about one arrest. It was about everything that had been missed, and what might still be buried.
No one arrived in time. Behind the scenes, something else was happening. A pattern was forming, even if no one wanted to see it yet. The women were similar in age, similar in lifestyle, similar in how they disappeared. But the dots were never connected. Part of the problem was division. Different police departments handled different cases. Information was not shared. Evidence was locked away. Some investigators pushed hard, others did not. Years slipped by. Then came the discovery at Gilgo Beach. When the first 4 sets of remains were found close together, everything changed. Investigators knew this was no random act. The placement was careful. The location was hidden but easy to return to. The killer knew the area. News spread fast. Headlines used words like monster and predator. Fear returned to Long Island. People locked doors earlier. Parents watched their children more closely. But still, no arrest. As time passed, more remains were found in nearby areas. Some were far older. Some did not match the first victims. This raised a disturbing question. Was this one killer or more than one? The case grew messy. The public grew frustrated. Families grew tired of waiting. Then something unexpected happened. Technology began to catch up with the past. Investigators reopened old files. Phone records that once seemed useless were now gold. Burner phones, cheap phones used only briefly, had left digital footprints. Each phone told a small part of the story. Calls were made to victims. Calls were short. Then the phones went dark, but location data still existed. Cell towers remembered. And again, one area kept appearing: Midtown Manhattan. Not just the city, specific blocks, specific times, patterns that repeated. Investigators didn't rush. They worked quietly. They built a case piece by piece. They compared phone data with travel records. They looked at vehicle descriptions. They studied habits. One name began to stand out: Rex Heuermann. At first, it seemed impossible. He didn't fit the picture most people had in their minds. He wasn't young, he wasn't flashy, he wasn't known to police. He was an architect. He owned a firm, he worked long hours. He blended into the crowd of New York professionals every day. But the data didn't lie. Phone locations matched his office. Phone movements matched his home. Travel times matched disappearance windows. Investigators watched him. They followed him in public places. They learned his routines. He bought burner phones. He discarded them. Then he bought more. Slowly, the walls closed in. At the same time, investigators reviewed online activity. Searches linked to devices tied to Heuermann raised alarms. They were specific, disturbingly specific, too close to the crimes to be ignored. Still, police waited. They wanted certainty. When they finally moved, it was fast and controlled. Heuermann was arrested in public. The image of him in handcuffs shocked the nation. But for the families, shock was mixed with pain. They had waited years for this moment. As details of the arrest became public, another layer of horror emerged. Authorities suggested the evidence pointed to planning, long-term planning, a double life hidden behind a normal routine. People asked the same question again and again. How could no one notice? Neighbors described him as strange but harmless. Co-workers said he was quiet. Some recalled odd behavior, nothing that screamed danger. That was the most frightening part. He looked like anyone else. As the case unfolded, investigators made it clear this was not finished. The arrest was not the end. It was the beginning of something much larger. More cases were being reviewed. More disappearances were being linked. The beach was only one chapter of a much longer story. And then came a detail that changed everything. Authorities hinted that Heuermann may have been active far earlier than anyone realized, that the timeline might stretch back years before the Gilgo discoveries. If true, this meant something unthinkable. There could be more victims who were never found, families who never knew what happened, stories that ended without answers. As court proceedings began, the public watched closely. Every word mattered. Every detail was examined. The man accused of these crimes said nothing. He sat still, silent. And the silence was loud, because behind that silence was a question that refused to go away. Was Gilgo Beach only one of many places where the truth had been buried? The room was silent as the evidence list was read aloud. Each item felt heavier than the last. Phones, records, data pulled from years ago that now pointed in one direction, straight at the man sitting alone at the defense table. Rex Heuermann did not move. He did not look back. He stared forward as if the words were not meant for him. But everyone in that courtroom knew this moment was real. After years of waiting, the Gilgo Beach case was no longer a mystery without a face. It had a name. Outside the courthouse, cameras crowded together. Reporters spoke in hushed voices as if being too loud might break something fragile. Families of victims stood nearby. Some cried. Some stared straight ahead. Some looked angry.
This was supposed to be closure. But closure did not come easily.
As investigators explained how they connected the suspect to the crimes, the story grew deeper and more disturbing. This was not a crime of chance. This was not sudden violence. Prosecutors described careful steps, long planning, a person who watched, waited, and returned to normal life as if nothing had happened. That idea shook people more than anything else, because it meant the danger had lived among them for years. Investigators explained how burner phones were used to contact victims, how those phones went silent, how location data placed them near Heuermann's work and home, how travel records matched times when women disappeared. The pattern was clear. What was not clear was how much more there was to uncover. That question haunted everyone. As police searched deeper into Heuermann's past, they found signs that made them pause. Old movements, old habits, small details that once meant nothing, but now felt heavy with meaning. They began reopening cases, disappearances that had never been solved, women whose names faded from headlines years ago, families who were told there was no hope. Now, hope returned, but it came with fear. Because if these cases were connected, then the story of Gilgo Beach was not just about one place. It was about time. How long someone could hide, how many chances were missed, and how many lives were affected. Investigators were careful with their words. They did not promise answers. They only said they were looking. But looking was enough to reopen wounds. Families spoke out. Some said they had always believed their loved one was taken. Others said they were warned not to push too hard, that they were told to move on. Now, those voices were louder. The public listened. As details came out, people learned more about the suspect's daily life. He went to work. He ate lunch in the city. He returned home. Neighbors waved. No alarms were raised. That normal life became part of the story. How could someone accused of such crimes live so quietly? Experts explained that some killers hide behind routine, that control and planning are part of the behavior, that blending in is the goal. That explanation did not make it easier to accept. It made it scarier. The courtroom sessions continued. Evidence was shown. Timelines were explained. Prosecutors spoke slowly, making sure every detail landed. And still, questions remained. Not all remains found near Gilgo Beach were officially connected. Some victims did not fit the same pattern. Some cases stayed open. This led to a chilling possibility. There may not have been just one story happening along that stretch of beach, or the full story has not been told yet. Investigators admitted they were still searching, still testing, still reviewing tips. The case, they said, was active. Active meant unfinished, and unfinished meant the truth was still coming. As weeks passed, the public attention did not fade. Instead, it grew. People rewatched old interviews. They looked at maps. They searched for connections. The beach became more than a location. It became a symbol of how easily danger can hide, a symbol of how voices can be ignored, a symbol of justice delayed. For the families, every update was painful. Each new detail reopened grief, but many said they would rather know the truth than live in silence, even if the truth was terrible. As the case moved forward, one thing became clear. This was not just about one man. It was about a system that failed to act quickly, about warnings that were missed, about lives that might have been saved. And that realization changed the tone of the story. This was no longer just a crime. It was a lesson, a warning. As prosecutors prepared for what would come next, they made one thing known. They were not done. Not with the evidence, not with the timeline, not with the possibility of more victims. The investigation would continue, and so would the questions. Because somewhere in the past, there are still unanswered moments, still missing pieces, still names waiting to be spoken.
And until every piece is found, the story of Gilgo Beach is not finished.
Because some stories don't end with an arrest. They end when every voice is finally heard. The beach looked the same as it always had. Wind moved through the tall grass, cars passed by on the road. The ocean kept rolling in and out, calm and steady, as if nothing bad had ever happened there. But everyone now knew the truth. Gilgo Beach was no longer just a place on a map. It was a reminder of what can happen when danger hides in silence. As the case moved forward, investigators shifted their focus. The arrest had answered one question, but it opened many more. They began asking not just who did this, but how it was allowed to happen for so long. Files were reviewed again, old decisions were questioned, missed chances were brought into the light. Families spoke publicly about their pain. Some said they felt ignored. Others said they had begged for help and were turned away. Their words were hard to hear, but impossible to ignore. This was not just about crimes, it was about failure. Failure to listen, failure to act, failure to protect. Experts explained that many victims were seen as less important because of their lifestyle. That truth made people uncomfortable. It forced the public to look at how justice is sometimes uneven. And once that door opened, it could not be closed. The Gilgo Beach case became a turning point. Police departments promised changes. New task forces were formed. Cold cases were reopened across the country. Families who had lost hope began calling again. As Rex Heuermann remained behind bars, prosecutors prepared for a long legal battle. The evidence would be tested, arguments would be made. The outcome was not yet decided. But something had already changed. Silence was broken. The story reached far beyond New York. People across America paid attention. They asked hard questions. They demanded better systems. They wanted answers not just for Gilgo Beach, but for every case like it. For the families, justice still felt far away. But many said knowing the truth mattered. Knowing that their loved ones were not forgotten mattered, even if the pain never fully fades. The beach still stands. The road still runs alongside it. Life goes on, but the memory remains. A quiet place where secrets were buried. A case that showed how evil can hide behind normal faces. A reminder that ignoring warning signs can cost lives. And as the investigation continues, one truth stands above all others. This story is not just about the past. It is about what we choose to do next.